Week 17 of the NFL season literally kicks off tomorrow. It's a shortened week for a lot of teams with some major playoff implications on the line, and we're going to see who steps up to the plate and who ends up ruining or not ruining their fans' holiday. The results of Week 16 have allowed for some very interesting scenarios to play out potentially here in this week, so let's see how things go. Today I'm going to give you my breakdown and predictions of all the action and all of the biggest storylines to look out for. Without further ado, let's get right into it, starting off on Christmas Day when the Kansas City Chiefs play the Pittsburgh Steelers. Both of these teams are going off of very, very little rest. We'll have to see how Pat Mahomes holds up. Seems like the ankle is doing just fine, but it's a shortened week and you never know what might happen, and he's playing a very tough Pittsburgh Steelers defense that are coming off a very brutal loss to the Ravens where they just got outplayed in the second half. This game's rather important for both sides. The Steelers can actually still control their own destiny if they just win out. They can still win their division technically despite that loss to Baltimore, while the Chiefs can walk away with the top seed in the AFC with a victory here. Not gonna lie, there's a scenario where this game could be really good. Both teams could easily take it just knowing how they like to pull out the BS. Nothing would surprise me with this one, but I'm going to go with the Chiefs to win this game. I think first and foremost, this is a really important match for them so they can clinch that one seed, and they're not going to let it go to waste. They'll make that final push so they can get a couple of weeks to rest up, get more healthy, and be well prepared for the second round of the playoffs. Aside from that, though, the Chiefs seemingly these last couple of years have been very clutch in December. And Pat Mahomes, I keep seeing more and more of Brady in him with how he just finds ways to win the game no matter what the situation is looking like. I expect them to win this one, especially because the Steelers, I don't know if they're going to have George Pickens back. Apparently, there's a good chance that he will be ready, but it's not 100% certain. He may not be 100% out there, and we've seen the difference when he is healthy and when he is not. It is a lot tougher for the Steelers to move the football, and just knowing how stingy the Chiefs are against the run, they're going to have to pass, and I think the Steelers are going to make some bad mistakes that lead to their demise in this one. At the 4:30 spot on Christmas is the Ravens versus the Texans. I won't lie, Houston did show some good fight against Kansas City, but CJ Stroud just hasn't been the same player as we saw in his rookie season. He's been making a lot more mistakes. The turnovers have been a real problem, and the Ravens seemingly are starting to force more of them as the season goes on. We saw them do that pretty successfully against the Steelers, and I have a lot of confidence in some of those veterans on defense to do the same to CJ Stroud, who's just having a rough sophomore year. And with Tank Dell out as well, maybe their morale starting to get a bit low, and generally the Texans haven't played that great against the top teams in the league outside of the early season, so I think you just gotta go with the Ravens. They're the better team, they're trying to make that push to win their division, and this could take them one step closer. I don't think they'll waste it. That young Texans defense will not know what's coming. There's too much to cover, and I doubt the Texans offense will be able to keep up, so I got Baltimore taking this one. And then on Thursday night, you've got the Seattle Seahawks versus the Chicago Bears. As always, the Bears are this really weird football team this year with rookie Caleb Williams under center. Sometimes they look like crap, other times they're able to get up like over 300 passing yards on the day. I mean, they did play a pretty trash Lions defense that's really banged up, so that probably helps. But you never really know with these guys, especially because there's nothing to play for, and Seattle has a lot of pressure on them. This could end up being a pretty uncomfortable match, but with how the Bears are playing right now, despite them being overdue for a win, I just can't confidently say with a right mind that they're going to beat the Seahawks. They're in desperation mode to potentially win their division. They just played a really close game against the Vikings. They're showing that there's still a lot of fight left in this squad. And you just can't trust the Bears on a week-to-week basis. That's just how it goes, man. Caleb did good against the Lions, but against a Seattle defense that is significantly tougher, that isn't injured to hell and back, they're probably going to go way back down to earth. And with how Geno's playing, he'll definitely outpace Caleb and win this game. Next, the Chargers are taking on the Patriots in New England. It's always tough when a team that plays in warm weather has to travel across the country to a place that's really cold. That could work to their disadvantage in this Saturday afternoon slot, but it's the Patriots. They are just not talented enough. I give them credit for pushing the Bills a little bit, but divisional games can be weird sometimes. Against a well-prepared Chargers team that could literally clinch a playoff spot with a win here, I'm expecting them to go out there and take care of business. They'll establish the run early on. They'll probably get Drake May to make a mistake or two with how that defense has been playing, and that'll be that. It's just a mean mismatch, although I am intrigued over that cold weather thing. And at 4:30 on Saturday, the Bengals are hosting the Broncos. This one's really interesting. Playoffs are on the line here. If the Broncos win this game, it's over. They're going to clinch a playoff spot alongside the Chargers, and the Bengals will be eliminated. But if Cincy can take this game, there will still be a glimmer of hope for them to potentially make the playoffs. It is so slim, but it will still be possible. This is going to be a really tough game that tests them, though. That high-flying offense versus one of the best defenses in the league. Let's see if the Bengals can show up here. The Broncos have all the things necessary to shut them down with a good secondary and a good pass rush to keep Joe Burrow on his toes. It's going to be rough, and knowing the Bengals' track record in these games, one might argue that this should favor the Broncos, despite them being on the road. However, I've been ride or die with the Bengals this year, despite them losing a lot of games I picked, and I'm going to stick with them till the very end until there is no chance of them making the playoffs. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Broncos offense hasn't looked as good recently. Bo Nix has been making mistakes, so maybe there's a chance for this trash Bengals defense to make a big play when the season is in the most important part of it here. I am picking the Bengals to win this game in a close one. I think the offense will prevail. The Broncos are overdue to have a pretty rough game defensively, I feel like, where nothing really goes their way. And the Bengals have enough weapons to cause some chaos with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. So I'm going with the Bengals to win this one. I could be very wrong here, but I think when you have this type of desperation that some good things could potentially happen for you. I don't think Joe Burrow and those boys are done just yet. And for the last game on Saturday night, the Rams are hosting the Arizona Cardinals, and this one's pretty huge for playoff implications. The Cardinals got eliminated last week after getting embarrassed by the Carolina Panthers, and the Rams, on the other hand, currently lead the division and could actually clinch it if they win and Seattle loses to Chicago. The Cardinals have a chance to play spoiler. It's a tough way for their season to end after last weekend, but they could at least end it on some kind of strong note if they're able to knock the Rams down and cause some chaos within their division. And if you remember correctly, in the early part of this season, they absolutely crushed the Rams. However, things have changed a lot since then. It's been a long season. We've seen both teams go through some ups and downs, and we're at the point where the Rams look like a significantly better football team, and I'm very concerned the Cardinals are demoralized at this point. Losing to the Panthers clearly was a big shocker for them. Their players did not take it very well, and with the general lack of great play and the sloppiness we've seen from them recently, I don't trust them to beat the red-hot Rams. The veterans who looked really good at this point last year, and they're probably going to do it again here. I think the Rams outpace the Cardinals this time, they get their revenge, and they get one step closer to winning their division. Now for the Sunday slot, and with the 1 p.m. games, we're starting off with the Buffalo Bills hosting the New York Jets. I'll give the Jets a little bit of credit. Recently, they've played a lot better than what we saw in the early part of this season, but they've still been losing all of these big games nonetheless, and I still don't trust them. There's no reason to. Their season's over, they're terrible, they massively underperformed, and this Buffalo Bills team looks like a Super Bowl contender. They're not winning this game. I promised myself I'd never pick the Jets in a big game for the rest of this year, and I'm holding true to that. Although this game could end up being kind of tough, it'll be interesting to watch because Josh Allen did seem to aggravate his left hand, his non-throwing hand a little bit in that matchup against the Patriots. Clearly it was bothering him, and it was already a problem to begin with. So maybe there's a world where he ends up struggling out there, and he has a rough game against the Jets, especially with that dangerous pass rush. But I think the Bills find a way to get it done, not necessarily because they execute better, but because they can expect the Jets to go out there and shoot themselves in the foot, as they like to do so often. As for a more interesting divisional game, how about the Minnesota Vikings hosting the Green Bay Packers? We're talking two of the best teams in the league, two of the best records going head-to-head. The last time these two played, the Packers ended up losing a tough one. The Vikings were able to barely hold on despite a late push from Green Bay, and I'm wondering if that'll happen again here. The Vikings, they've just been tough. They've proven me wrong time after time this year. Sam Darnold has been a machine out there. He's been looking really good these last handful of weeks. The defense has been making some stops as well, and they've continued to make some fourth quarter magic happen against some pretty decent teams. But on the other hand, the Packers, they've been pretty hot over the last month and a half, only losing 2 games to the Lions along the way, essentially. They always play these NFC North opponents close as well, so I think there's a good possibility they can get their revenge against the Vikings. I mean, how much longer can you go just losing to these guys over and over again? Eventually, you've got to take one when you keep playing these close games. It seems like since the last time, they've done a much better job of establishing the run with Josh Jacobs. And there's so many different weapons on the Packers that make them pretty tough to prepare for. I still am firmly believing that the Vikings are overdue for a loss. I have the Packers winning this game on the road, finally getting that big win over a divisional opponent. The Packers are another team that seemed to get really dangerous this time of year, much like what I was saying with the Rams. We saw it last year, and I think it's going to happen again here, where they go on a hot streak here in December, and they carry that momentum into the playoffs. I still think the Packers should be a better team than the Vikings, and they will prove it here with this one, although I do think this game will definitely be going to the wire. Next, we've got the trash bowl between the Raiders and the Saints. Thank you, Vegas Raiders. As a Giants fan, I appreciate you guys winning that game last week against the Jags, so my guys have the #1 overall pick. Thank you in advance. And now you have an opportunity to go out and potentially win 2 in a row to further destroy your tank here. The Saints are an absolute mess right now. Derek Carr, it seems like he's not coming back this year. Alvin Kamara's probably done for the year as well. The Saints aren't going to move the ball at all unless Spencer Rattler can randomly get his shit together. I just don't see that happening. I think it's too early for him to dominate. This Raiders team is very exposable, especially on defense with no Max Crosby and everything. But I don't trust the Saints with where they're at right now. I am picking the Raiders to win this football game. Aiden O'Connell has actually looked decent at times this year, and I think him and Brock Bowers are going to ball out against a destroyed New Orleans Saints team. I got the Raiders to destroy their tank even more. Speaking of tanks, the Giants are hosting the Colts, and I can't wait to watch the Giants lose 30-7 again. It's going to be so great. Whether it's Drew Lock, Tommy DeVito, Tim Boyle, I don't care. The Giants are an atrocity. This is the worst team of my lifetime by far. They're not going to come close to winning a game ever again this season. The Colts are very inconsistent. Anthony Richardson is prone to making some mistakes, but I mean, come on, man. Against the Giants, he's going to have his way even if he throws like 4 interceptions because the Giants are horrendous on offense. Jonathan Taylor's going to run all over one of the worst run defenses in the league, and that'll be that, man. The Colts still technically have something to play for. And then you've got the Carolina Panthers versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Oh, baby, this one is exciting. The Bucs, they just came off a brutal loss to Dallas, while the Panthers got back on the right foot, beating the Cardinals. And the last time these two played, it was incredibly close, and the Panthers should have won if it weren't for a crazy fumble in overtime. I'd be scared if I was the Bucs, man. This is one where they could very easily drop. The Panthers love to play these guys close. You know they want to get revenge. They're starting to play better once again, showing that they can play good when it matters, and they like to play spoiler. They like to rise up to these types of occasions. So this is a terrifying match for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And you know, had they actually beaten Dallas, I probably would have picked the Panthers to win this one. But because they lost to Dallas, I think it serves as a wake-up call. They come back strong against a Panthers defense that leaves a lot to be desired, and they win this one more comfortably compared to the last time. You can't trust the Panthers on a week-to-week basis, and the Buccaneers are fighting for their lives in the division, so I got Tampa winning this one. And how about another trash bowl for you? The Jaguars versus the Titans. How exciting. A rematch here in the AFC South. The last time these two played, the Jaguars somehow won one of the most ugly games I have ever seen in my entire life. However, this time the Titans should be having Mason Rudolph go out there. And based off of what we saw in that late push against Indy, clearly is a more capable quarterback than what Will Levis can be. I mean, that's obvious. Mayo Man is terrible. And I think this time it's going to be enough to beat the Jaguars. Just not having Mayo Man at quarterback is going to push them. Mac Jones, he had his one good game against the Jets. He's back down to earth, played like crap against the Raiders. And I think just knowing how that game against the Titans went, that the Titans are just going to do a bit more. While the Jags have like 13 points, the Titans will have like 20 or something, and that'll be that. It won't be a fun game. It's not worth watching, but these two teams love to troll each other. They love to split the divisional series, and I think the Titans end up, I guess, having the last laugh by winning, but in reality, they just screw over their tank. Then over at the 4 p.m. slot, we're starting with the Browns versus the Dolphins, and I'll be curious to see how this game goes. Obviously, I'm picking the Dolphins to win this one. They're making a late season surge here. They're starting to play better as these weeks go on. I'm seeing more of the Dolphins of old. Their defense is also tough, but I'm curious to see how this game goes because of the Browns quarterback situation. As we all know, Jameis was inactive. He was the third string quarterback last week against the Bengals. I'm pretty sure that he was also nursing an injury as well. That's part of the reason he wasn't playing. But I'd be curious to know if he was healthy enough, if he'd end up being the starter again, or if they're going to stick with DTR. I really don't know what to expect there. And depending on who's playing, this game could be really good or really bad. DTR, he had a couple of decent showings in that game against the Bengals, but he was mostly terrible. And against a tough Dolphins defense that is definitely better than what Cincy has, it'll probably be another rough game for him. The Browns offense is probably going to struggle a lot, and the Dolphins will slowly but surely outpace their opponents and win this game with relative ease. And at the 425 spot, it's going to be the Eagles versus the Cowboys. Very delicate situation here for Philly. The outcome of this game very much depends on the health of Jalen Hurts. He suffered a concussion in that game against the Commanders and did not return. Now we're going to have to keep an eye on how he does in the concussion protocol. If he ends up passing it and he's ready to go, they're probably going to destroy the Cowboys, who I don't trust on a week-to-week basis. But if he's not ready to go, that's when things can get dicey. Maybe you can rely on the run game and the injured Cowboys secondary to somehow will your way to a victory anyway with somebody like Kenny Pickett at quarterback, but I have a lot of doubts that they'll end up being successful with that type of game plan. It'll be a lot easier if Jalen Hurts isn't there. You can stack the box for Saquon, make this team one-dimensional, and make this a very winnable game for the Dallas Cowboys. This is a tough one to call. It really depends on the health of one of the most important positions you could ever want to talk about. So I think that I'm going to go with the Eagles if Jalen Hurts plays, and if the Cowboys don't have to worry about Hurts, they're probably going to win this game. It's cheesy to go that way, but it all depends on the injury report. It vastly changes how this Eagles team operates, although it still could be a pretty close game regardless, just because the Eagles defense is pretty stingy, and Cooper Rush isn't the greatest quarterback. So we'll see what happens there. Put an asterisk on this one. Then on Sunday night, a big game here between the Falcons and the Washington Commanders. A lot on the line here. The Falcons, if they can win this game and Tampa Bay loses, I'm pretty certain that they lock up the division. Meanwhile, the Commanders can lock up a playoff berth with a win here, and technically they still are in the running to win the division if, let's say, the Eagles lose out and they win out. And just to make things even more fun, this high-stakes game is between two rookie QBs, Michael Penix in his second ever start versus Jaden Daniels, who is starting to pick things up again. It wasn't a perfect game, but he was pretty damn clutch when he needed to be against Philly. And obviously, going against Atlanta's defense, that's a big difference. That should be a lot easier. There should be a lot more opportunities for the Commanders to put points up on the board and not struggle so much. But on the other hand, Commanders, their defense isn't the greatest either, and on top of it all, they don't have that much film to look at for Michael Penix outside of that one game against the Giants and stuff he did in college, so maybe the element of surprise could be in Atlanta's favor here. I'm expecting this to be a pretty close game, but I don't know if I can trust Michael Penix in such a big game. He only played against the crap Giants. Playing against a tough playoff caliber team like Washington is another step above, and Jaden Daniels already has so much experience under his belt this year, so I'm going to go with the vets, I guess you could say, to win this game. Atlanta might make slightly more mistakes or they won't be able to execute as well, and then the Commanders can take advantage. Should be a tough one. Should be one of the most interesting games of the week. I'm pretty excited for this one. And finally, on Monday night, the Lions are taking on the 49ers. Now, under normal circumstances, this could have been a preview of the NFC Championship game for the second year in a row, but obviously, things haven't worked out that way. The Niners were officially eliminated from playoff contention this week, and they're playing a Lions team who, despite being hobbled, are still doing their best to win games and be competitive. They're arguably the best or second best team in football right now, and with how demoralized the Niners are, and with how the Lions are trying to get revenge for what happened in the NFC Championship last year, I've gotta back Detroit here. With how banged up that Lions defense is, the Niners have a real chance to play spoiler here, but I don't know if they have it in them. Brock Purdy's definitely playing for a contract, which certainly helps, but how the rest of the guys feel, I'm not so sure. With how Debo's been playing recently, with how banged up they are on both sides of the football as well, I don't know, man. I don't really trust the Niners without their run game to beat the Lions. That's like really important to have that balanced attack. They just don't. The Lions, they're still going to put up their points, and I don't think the Niners can keep up in this one. I got to go with Detroit. The revenge game just looks too juicy on paper. And that is going to do it for my Week 17 predictions. Let me know what you think of the upcoming games down in the comments below and what your best bets are as well. And if you enjoyed this video and you want more videos just like this, make sure to give it a like and subscribe for future NFL content.